Hello, I'm Tony Lee Peters and I help people live better lives. This video is especially for you if you're going through the loss of a much beloved pet. Maybe you're dealing with the grief or extreme grief, or you're coming to that period where your pet's journey is ending and you've got that grief coming. I believe that responsible and loving pet owners view their pets as members of the family. I don't particularly like the phrase pets or pet owners or animal owners. I do believe that in some sense our animals choose us. I don't believe that our animals own us. I believe that we adopt our animals. As I said, our animals do become part of our family. So I've always seen my animals as adopted children, adopted sons, adopted daughters. Now, whether your animal is a cat, a dog, a tortoise, a reptile, a fish, the love that you have for that animal and the love that your animal gives back to you is just as important as if it was coming from a person. And I think sometimes people who perhaps don't have animals just can't grasp this concept that animals can mean so much to us and can bring so much to our life. I remember years ago, I used to work in one of my older jobs, and one of my co-workers come in and was absolutely distraught because her pet rabbit had died that morning. And I said to her, "Why are you here? You need to be taking some time. You know, there's things that you need to sort out, and you also need to be working through this grief process." Unfortunately, our boss, who wasn't an animal lover, did not share the same sentiment. And animals, whatever they are, become really, really important to us. As I said, they become part of our families. Sometimes, if you're very lucky to have a dog with a long life or a cat with a long life, you're growing up with these animals. You may have been given a pet. You may have been given perhaps a dog or a cat as a child, and when you get into your early 20s, that could be the period when the animal passes away, and it's really hard to deal with. But also, I don't think it really matters the length of time that we have an animal. It's the quality of the time that we spend with them. I think one of the hardest things to deal with, um, once you've got over the shock of the passing of your animal, is the absence, the total absence, the absence, the silence that your animal is no longer around becomes deafening. It can be really hard to cope with the fact that you're no longer seeing your animal, you're no longer hearing your animal. And it's often these everyday moments that we shared with our animals that we end up missing the most. It could be that perhaps our dog liked to snuggle with us at a certain time of day, or the way that our cats or our dogs would greet us when we come home from work, the interaction that we have with our reptiles, those little quirks of their personalities and their characters that we often take for granted when we're living with our animals. But once our animals go, it's incredibly hard to deal with that separation, that silence. So when you are in the initial stages of grief, it's important to share your feelings with someone and try to seek out people who understand or have some kind of understanding of what you're going through. You want to avoid the people who might say to you, "Oh, it's only an animal, it's just a cat, it's just a lizard." These people, perhaps they haven't had the pleasure of having a beloved pet, so they don't quite understand where your grief is coming from or how important this loss is to you. And it's important that you give yourself time. Now, I have lost quite a few animals over the years, and it's always tough to deal with. But one thing that I've found that really helps is when we start to observe our grief. One really important factor about grief is that we can get lost in it. And I think that's a natural thing to do, to get lost in our grief, because when we are grieving and when we are really feeling this emotional sadness and this despair, this desperation, in a way, that's keeping us connected to the animal that we have lost. This pain that we're feeling, it's a sense of still having that animal with us. And it's hard to let that go and move on. But to let go and to move on doesn't mean that you are going to forget about your animal. And perhaps it doesn't mean that your animal is no longer here and that you're completely separated. I guess it depends on your spiritual point of view or how you feel about when animals die. I believe that the spirit or the energy of the animal is always around us. I've had personal experience of seeing signs or seeing the animal when it was no longer there. And I'm not talking about delusions brought about by being completely grief stricken. I think I really do believe that our animals come back to us. Our animals surround us with their energy and with their spirit. And sometimes they leave little signs, or they present little signs to show that they are still there. And that's helping us through our grief process. And animals during life are natural caretakers. They often form very, very strong bonds with their adopted fathers or their adopted family. There's normally perhaps one member of the family that they'll really, really connect to. And I think that's indicative of responsible and loving animal adopters, that we do create these really strong bonds with our animals. But of course, the stronger the bond, perhaps the stronger the grief or the feeling of grief when our animals pass on. So it's really important to, when we are going through this grieving process, and there are various stages of the grieving process, which most of you are well aware of, and I'm not going to go through those stages. But when we're going through them, we can get lost, as I said, we can get lost in the grief. It connects us back to the animal and we don't want to let go. But letting go does not mean that we have to forget or that we have to completely let go of the animal. If the animal's energy and spirit is still around, we will never let go of the animal. So one thing you can do is to observe your grieving process. Tell yourself that it's completely natural to grieve. It's completely natural to feel this despair, this sadness when our animals die. But observe how you are grieving. Where are your thoughts going to? One of the most common, I guess, negative emotions that we experience when we're grieving an animal is guilt. Did we do everything that we could have done while the animal was alive? And maybe during the last few days, was there something that we did wrong? Was there something that we could have done to have helped the animal not to suffer? In the case of euthanization, did we act soon enough? Or did we act too soon? Perhaps you believe that life is predestined and so death is predestined. And if you do, find some comfort in that. Because if our futures and if our birth dates and our death dates are pre-mapped out for us, then why feel guilty for, did I do enough for the animal? Could I have extended the animal's life? Some of us may have nagging feelings of, oh, I remember that time when I could have taken that dog for a walk and I didn't because I just didn't feel like it. And we can end up ruminating, going over these thoughts over and over again. But just know that when your animals were here and when you were so blessed to have your animals in your life, you did the best that you could for your animals. Another thing that really helped me with my grief going through the passing of my animals was asking myself the question, what lesson did that particular animal teach me? My animals have helped me become much more patient, have helped me to express love. They've also helped me when it comes to comfort. They've helped me to make some very wise decisions because I had something else to be responsible for. When our animals are with us, when they're alive, they deserve our very best. They give us their very best. And so in death, our animals also deserve the best. Our animals deserve to be celebrated. Celebrate your animal in whatever way that you can, whether you cremate the animal and you keep the ashes at home, whether you bury the animal, to the photos that you select, to talking to people about your animals. Your animals, when they pass over, they're no longer here physically with you, but they will always, always remain a part of you. And at the start of this video, I spoke about trying to avoid the people who perhaps will negate your relationship or your experience with animals. Our animals do become our children. And perhaps one lesson might be to teach those people that animals can become beloved and really important members of their own family. So when it comes to dealing with bereavement and grief of your animal, go through the process, realize that it is completely natural to feel devastation when your animal passes over. If you or your friends or your family feel that perhaps your grief is resulting in some unhealthy behavior, take a step back, acknowledge the fact that you are grieving, and start becoming aware of this grieving process. Observe what's happening and try to uncover why this is happening. Is there some residual, or is there some guilt underneath this grieving process? If there is, deal with that guilt. We, as animal adopters, we all make mistakes, as we do as parents with our children. It's just part of being human. No father, no mother is perfect. We're always going to make some kind of mistake, and there are some things that we're going to regret that we've done and that we wish that we could have done better. So remember that when you're dealing with guilt over the death of your animal. And talk to people, talk to as many people as possible, and talk to those people who really do have an understanding as to what you're going through. And also be really aware that the deeper the grief, it's very likely that what you're doing subconsciously perhaps is your emotions are helping you to stay connected to that animal when they're no longer around physically. But you don't need all that emotional baggage to feel connected to your animal. You can think about your animal. You can, in moments of when life gets a bit better, spend some time thinking about your animal, looking through photos, videos. And one thing that I would suggest when your animal is alive is to take as many photos, take as much video as you can of your animal. That really helps during the grieving process. And also remember that your animals, over the course of their life, perhaps it's years, hopefully it's years, your animals probably would have touched many people. And it can be a good thing to get in touch with some of those people that perhaps you've lost contact with, just to let them know that this animal has passed and they were, for a short period of time, a part of that animal's life. Your animal was a gift to you. When your animal was alive, you were bestowed a beautiful and unconditionally loving gift. And this gift can continue, but in a different form when your animal passes away. What lesson did your animal teach you? And what lesson is your animal still teaching you now during your grief process? It's cliche to say, but things will get better. You will go through life with your animal always with you. Now, whether you believe in the rainbow bridge, that when your time comes, that your animals will be waiting at the rainbow bridge to take you into heaven or the afterlife, whether you believe that or whether you don't, just find comfort in the fact that your animals are always with you and that you did your best when your animals were alive. Thank you for watching. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and be kind to your animals.